Welcome to our channel, where the shadows of suburban life hide unimaginable horrors. Tonight, we uncover 3 spine-chilling tales. Lock your doors, dim the lights, and join us as we explore the hidden terrors of suburban neighborhoods.
Sarah Mitchell moved into her new home in Havenwood with a sense of optimism and a desire for a fresh start. The house, a charming 2-story colonial, seemed perfect. It had a cozy feel, with its hardwood floors and large windows that let in plenty of light. The neighbors were welcoming, and Sarah quickly made a few acquaintances. One evening, while organizing the basement, Sarah noticed something odd. There were strange symbols etched into the walls, barely visible under layers of old paint. Intrigued, she began to scrape away the paint, revealing an intricate pattern of unfamiliar symbols. She took pictures and posted them online, hoping someone might recognize them. The response was immediate and disturbing. Several people suggested that the symbols were related to occult practices, which piqued Sarah's curiosity further. She decided to investigate, unaware of the danger she was inviting into her life. That night, Sarah was awakened by faint, eerie chants and the flicker of candlelight seeping through the walls. She strained to listen, her heart pounding. The sound seemed to come from the direction of Daniel Thornton's house next door. Daniel, the friendly real estate agent who had sold her the house and the captain of the neighborhood watch, had been especially welcoming. The next day, Sarah casually mentioned the noises to her neighbor Lisa, who quickly dismissed them. "Oh, Daniel sometimes has gatherings with the other watch members. It's nothing to worry about," Lisa said with a forced smile. Sarah's unease grew. She decided to dig deeper into the history of Havenwood and its residents. She visited the local library, where she discovered old newspaper articles about mysterious disappearances in the neighborhood over the years. The more she read, the more she was convinced that the cult was real and that her neighbors were involved. One evening, as Sarah was reviewing her notes, she heard a knock on her door. It was Daniel, holding a plate of cookies. "Just wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood again," he said with a warm smile. Sarah thanked him, trying to hide her discomfort. "By the way, I noticed you've been asking around about the neighborhood's history. Is there something you're particularly interested in?" Daniel asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Sarah hesitated. "Just curious about the place I'm living in," she replied, forcing a smile. Daniel's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Well, if you ever have any questions, feel free to ask. We're a close-knit community here. We look out for each other." As Daniel left, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She knew she was being watched. Over the next few days, Sarah's paranoia grew. She felt eyes on her wherever she went and received strange, cryptic messages on her phone. The chants and candlelight returned every night, growing louder and more intense. Sarah realized she needed to find concrete evidence of the cult's activities. One night, she decided to sneak into Daniel's house. She waited until the chanting began and then slipped out of her house, making her way to Daniel's backyard. She found a small window that led to the basement and carefully pried it open. Inside, the basement was dimly lit by dozens of candles. Sarah saw Daniel and several other neighbors in dark robes gathered around an altar. The symbols from her basement walls were everywhere. Her heart raced as she took pictures with her phone, careful to stay hidden. Suddenly, a hand clamped over her mouth. "I knew you were too curious for your own good," Daniel's voice whispered in her ear. Sarah struggled, but Daniel was too strong. He dragged her into the basement, where the cult members turned to face her. "You should have minded your own business, Sarah," Daniel said, his friendly facade completely gone. "Now you'll join us, whether you like it or not." Sarah's mind raced as she tried to think of a way out. She remembered the knife she had slipped into her pocket before leaving her house. With a swift movement, she stabbed Daniel's hand and broke free. The cult members lunged at her, but she managed to dodge them and run for the stairs. She burst out of the house, screaming for help. Her neighbors emerged from their homes, confused and alarmed. Sarah's evidence and the commotion were enough to bring the police. The cult members were arrested, and the truth about the cult's activities in Havenwood was finally revealed. In the aftermath, Sarah moved away from Havenwood, unable to shake the memories of her ordeal. She wrote about her experience, hoping to warn others about the dangers lurking beneath seemingly perfect communities. Despite the terror she had faced, she was determined to keep her curiosity and never stop seeking the truth. Years later, Sarah still carried the scars of her time in Havenwood, both physical and emotional. She had become a well-known advocate for exposing hidden evils in communities, often receiving tips from people who had read her story. One day, she received an anonymous package containing a familiar-looking candle and a note with a single symbol drawn on it. Her heart raced as she realized the cult might still be out there, watching her, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Emily Carter had always found solace in the quiet streets of Maplewood Grove. After moving in, she quickly settled into her routine, enjoying the tranquility of her new home. Her neighbors were friendly, and the community seemed close-knit. However, as the date of the lunar eclipse approached, Emily couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. On the night of the eclipse, Emily found herself unable to sleep. She stood by her bedroom window, watching the moon slowly turn a deep, blood-red color. The sight was both beautiful and disturbing. As she gazed at the sky, she noticed movement in her neighbor's backyard. A group of people, all wearing hooded robes, gathered under the eerie light. Curiosity and a sense of foreboding compelled Emily to investigate. She slipped out of her house and crept closer, hiding behind a hedge. The robed figures stood in a circle, chanting in a language she couldn't understand. In the center of the circle, Margaret Hawthorne held a large, ancient-looking book, her voice rising and falling with the chants. Emily's heart pounded as she realized the gravity of what she was witnessing. She took a few pictures with her phone, hoping to capture evidence. Suddenly, the chanting stopped, and the figures turned towards her as if sensing her presence. Panicked, Emily hurried back to her house, locking the doors behind her. That night, bizarre occurrences plagued Emily's home. Shadows moved independently of any light source, whispers echoed from dark corners, and her dreams were filled with vivid, terrifying images. She woke up drenched in sweat, her mind racing. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily began researching the symbols and rituals she had seen. She spent hours at the local library, poring over old books and articles. The more she learned, the more terrified she became. The cult worshipped ancient deities and believed that the lunar eclipse was a time of great power. They intended to use the eclipse to perform a ritual that required a human sacrifice. Emily's sense of dread grew as the night of the next lunar eclipse approached. She knew she had to act, but she felt alone and vulnerable. She decided to confide in her friend Mark, a fellow teacher who lived nearby. Mark was skeptical at first, but the fear in Emily's eyes convinced him to help. Together, they devised a plan to expose the cult. On the night of the eclipse, they would record the ritual and contact the authorities. As the moon began to turn red, Emily and Mark positioned themselves near Margaret's house, hidden from view. The ritual began, more intense and sinister than before. Emily's hands trembled as she held the camera, capturing every moment. Suddenly, Margaret's voice rang out, louder and more commanding. "Bring forth the sacrifice," she commanded. To Emily's horror, two robed figures dragged a young girl into the circle. Emily recognized her as Lily, one of her students. Fear turned to fury as Emily realized she had to act immediately. "Stay here and keep recording," Emily whispered to Mark before rushing forward. She burst into the circle, startling the cult members. "Let her go!" Emily shouted, grabbing Lily's hand and pulling her away. Margaret's eyes blazed with anger. "You meddling fool! You have no idea what you're interfering with!" she hissed. Emily stood her ground, her fear replaced by determination. "I won't let you harm her or anyone else," she said, her voice steady. The cult members closed in, but the sound of approaching sirens stopped them in their tracks. Mark had called the police, who arrived just in time to prevent the ritual from being completed. The cult members, including Margaret, were arrested, and Lily was saved. In the aftermath, Emily became a hero in Maplewood Grove. She continued to teach and protect her students, but the experience had changed her. She remained vigilant, aware that evil could lurk anywhere, even in the most seemingly perfect places. Years later, Emily still carried the memories of that night. She had moved on, but the scars remained. She wrote a book about her experience, hoping to warn others about the dangers of hidden evils. One day, she received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a familiar symbol drawn on it. Emily's heart raced as she realized that, despite her efforts, the cult's influence might not be entirely gone. She knew she had to remain vigilant, ready to confront whatever darkness lay ahead. Jake Thompson moved to Willowbrook with hopes of a peaceful life, away from the chaos of the city and the pressures of his once promising career as a journalist. The quiet suburban neighborhood seemed perfect, with its friendly residents and picturesque streets. However, a series of unexplained disappearances began to gnaw at Jake's curiosity. His close friend Lisa, who had always been a source of support, was the latest to vanish without a trace. One late night, unable to sleep, Jake noticed a procession of cloaked figures moving stealthily through the neighborhood. His heart pounded as he saw them carrying a struggling victim towards the old Collins house, the largest and most imposing in Willowbrook. Driven by fear and a burning need to uncover the truth, Jake followed them, staying hidden in the shadows. As he approached the Collins house, he saw the figures descend into a hidden basement entrance. Jake waited until the coast was clear before sneaking inside. The basement was dimly lit by flickering candles, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air was thick with the scent of incense and something far more sinister. Jake's breath caught as he stumbled upon a ritualistic chamber adorned with ancient symbols and an altar drenched in blood. He hid behind a stack of crates, paralyzed with fear. From his vantage point, he watched as the cloaked figures chanted in an unknown language, their leader, Edward Collins, standing at the center. Edward's voice was commanding and filled with dark fervor. The victim, bound and terrified, was placed on the altar. "We gather here to fulfill the ancient prophecy," Edward intoned. "Our loyalty and sacrifice ensure the prosperity of Willowbrook." Jake's mind raced. The disappearances, the rituals, the fear that had gripped the community, all of it made horrifying sense now. He knew he had to get out and expose the cult, but as he turned to leave, a cold hand clamped down on his shoulder. Well, what do we have here?" Edward's voice was calm but menacing. A curious soul who wandered where he shouldn't have. Jake was dragged into the center of the chamber, the cult member's eyes burning with fanaticism. Edward looked down at him with a mixture of pity and disdain. "You should have stayed in the dark, Jake. Now, you will join our sacrifice." Struggling to remain calm, Jake thought quickly. "You don't have to do this. People will notice if I disappear. They'll come looking for me." Edward chuckled. "We've been doing this for decades, Jake. No one notices, and no one comes looking. Willowbrook's prosperity demands our loyalty and sacrifices." As the cult prepared to continue their ritual, Jake managed to slip a small, concealed knife from his boot. In a desperate move, he slashed at the ropes binding his wrists and fought his way free, injuring a few cult members in the process. The basement erupted in chaos as Jake bolted for the exit. Adrenaline fueled his escape. He ran through the darkened streets, not stopping until he reached his home. He barricaded the door and called the police, his voice shaking with urgency. "You have to come quickly. There's a cult. People are being sacrificed. Please, hurry!" The police arrived in force, but by the time they stormed the Collins house, the cult had vanished. The ritualistic chamber was empty, its horrors concealed once more. Despite the lack of immediate evidence, Jake's testimony sparked an investigation that slowly unraveled the truth about Willowbrook's dark history. The community was shocked as the extent of the cult's influence became known. Edward Collins and several other prominent residents were arrested, and the missing persons cases were reopened. Jake became a hero in the eyes of many, but he couldn't shake the feeling of lingering dread. Years later, Jake still bore the scars of that night. He wrote a book about his experience, hoping to warn others about the dangers of blind trust and hidden evils. Despite his efforts, he couldn't entirely rid himself of the fear that the cult's influence might still linger in the shadows of Willowbrook. One evening, as Jake sat on his porch, he received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an ancient symbol drawn on it. His heart raced as he realized the fight against the cult might not be over. He knew he had to stay vigilant, ready to confront whatever darkness lay ahead.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the dark side of suburban life. We hope these chilling tales have made you question the safety of your own neighborhood. Remember, in the quietest places, the most terrifying secrets often hide. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more spine-tingling horror. Until next time, stay safe and stay vigilant. You never know what might be lurking just beyond your doorstep.